My name is Allison, I'm 32, and I still remember the exact moment my entire family turned against me at last year's Thanksgiving dinner. Mom was practically glowing as she announced that my brother Derek had just bought a stunning 5-bedroom colonial in Oakwood Hills. Everyone erupted in applause while I sat frozen, my fork suspended midair. "That's impossible," I said quietly. "He stole $300,000 from Dad's retirement fund last summer." The room went dead silent. My truth bomb had just obliterated our perfect family facade. I still feel the weight of those words hanging in the air sometimes. If you're watching this now, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. This family drama changed everything for me, and I wonder if any of you have had to face that moment where telling the truth meant risking everything. Drop a like if you've ever had to stand up against your family, and subscribe to follow my journey through what happened next. Sometimes one sentence can change everything, and this is the story of how mine shattered our family's perfect image forever. Growing up in our family, my brother Derek could never do any wrong. At 41, 9 years my senior, he had always been the golden child. While I was constantly held to impossible standards, Derek floated through life with a smile and a wink, charming his way out of every situation. I remember when we were kids, Derek broke Mom's favorite crystal vase while playing baseball in the house. I got grounded for 2 weeks because I should have stopped him. Meanwhile, Derek got ice cream because he was honest enough to admit it. That pattern continued for decades. Derek the perfect son. Derek the successful businessman. Derek who Mom and Dad bragged about to all their friends at church. Meanwhile, I was Allison the overly sensitive one. Allison who was too serious. Allison who needed to lighten up and stop being so dramatic. "Your brother works so hard," my mother Grace would say, patting his hand at family gatherings. "He's just like your father, a natural provider." At 70, my mother still looked at Derek with the same adoring eyes she had when he was the star quarterback bringing home trophies. My father Robert, 72, was a bit more reserved but equally proud, constantly retelling stories of Derek's business acumen to anyone who would listen. What nobody talked about was Derek's pattern of financial manipulation. It started small when we were younger. "Hey Al, can I borrow $20? I'll pay you back Friday." Friday would come and go, and Derek would act confused if I mentioned it. "I thought we were squared up," he'd say with that confident smile. "Remember when I gave you a ride to Jessica's house last month? That's worth at least 20. As adults, the amounts got bigger. Derek borrowed $5,000 from me for a can't-miss investment opportunity that mysteriously never paid off. He convinced our cousin Sophia to put up $15,000 for a business venture that disappeared. Aunt Patricia loaned him money for a car when his was stolen, only to see him driving a much nicer model than he allegedly lost. I found out about what happened to Dad's retirement fund completely by accident. After Dad's stroke last spring, I took a week off work to help organize his affairs. As a financial advisor myself, I was the natural choice to sort through his documents and make sure everything was in order. That's when I found the discrepancies. $327,000. Missing. Nearly a third of my father's retirement savings, painstakingly built over decades of working as an engineer, gone in a series of transfers over just 6 months. I'll never forget staring at those bank statements, my hands trembling as I followed the paper trail directly to an account in Derek's name. The first transfer happened right after Derek announced he was expanding his consulting business. Another large withdrawal coincided with his family's luxury vacation to Greece. The final transfer happened just 2 weeks before Dad's stroke. When I confronted my father about it, his reaction broke my heart. "Dad, did you authorize these transfers to Derek?" I asked, spreading the documents on his hospital bed tray. His face crumpled. Not with surprise, but with shame. "He said it was temporary," Dad whispered. "For a business opportunity. Said he'd pay it back with interest before I even needed it." "Dad, that's more than a third of your retirement. Please don't tell your mother," he begged, his hand clutching mine with surprising strength for someone recovering from a stroke. "It would kill her to know. And don't confront Derek. He promised he's going to fix this." I honored my father's wishes for months. I watched my mother dote on Derek at Sunday dinners. I listened to Dad make excuses about market downturns when Mom asked about their finances. I saw Derek buy a new car, take vacations, and post about his successful life on social media, all while knowing he had stolen from the man who had given him everything. As a financial advisor, the betrayal cut even deeper. I knew exactly what that money meant to my parents' future. I knew the sacrifices they had made to build that nest egg. And I knew, with professional certainty, that Derek's spending patterns indicated no intention of ever paying it back. When I started hearing rumors about Derek shopping for a new house in Oakwood Hills, the most expensive neighborhood in our city, something inside me snapped. Dad's stroke had been a warning. Life was fragile, time was precious, and my father deserved better than having his retirement dreams stolen by his own son. I had a feeling that the new house wasn't just a luxury purchase. It was the tip of an iceberg of lies and manipulation that had been growing for years. What I didn't realize was that exposing that tip would reveal something far more monstrous beneath the surface than even I had imagined. Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Lancaster had always been a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. Mom spent days preparing, the table set with her best china, the house filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. This year was no different on the surface, despite the shadow of Dad's health concerns. The sprawling ranch-style home where I grew up was decked out in fall decor, with Mom's handmade wreaths and centerpieces adorning every surface. Dad sat in his favorite recliner, looking frielier than I remembered, but smiling as he watched the parade on TV. Mom bustled around the kitchen in her apron, refusing help as always. "Let me do something, Mom," I offered, following her between kitchen and dining room. No, I've got it all under control," she insisted, brushing flour-covered hands on her apron. "Why don't you help your father with his drink? The doctor says he can have 1 glass of wine with dinner." By 4 o'clock, the house was filled with family. Cousin Sophia arrived with her husband Mike and their 2 children. Aunt Patricia and Uncle George brought their famous sweet potato casserole. Everyone exclaimed over how well Dad looked, though I could see the exhaustion in his eyes as he accepted hugs and well wishes. Derek was the last to arrive, making his entrance with his wife Emily and their teenage kids, Madison and Ryan. He carried in 2 expensive bottles of wine, kissing Mom on the cheek as he handed them over. "Only the best for the best cook in Pennsylvania," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mom beamed with pride. I watched him work the room, slapping backs and charming everyone with stories about his latest business trip to Chicago. Meanwhile, I helped Mom in the kitchen, the dutiful daughter in the background. When Derek approached Dad, I tensed, watching their interaction carefully. Dad smiled at his son, but I noticed he wouldn't meet Derek's eyes directly. When we finally gathered around the dining table, it was a tight fit for 16 people. The turkey glistened in the center, surrounded by all the traditional sides. Dad sat at the head of the table, with Mom to his right. Derek and his family sat in positions of honor near Dad, while I was relegated to the far end, squeezed between Aunt Patricia and one of Sophia's kids. After Dad said grace, the platters began circulating. The conversation flowed around football, the unusually warm fall weather, and updates on family members who couldn't attend. I picked at my food, anxiety building in my chest. Each time I looked at Derek laughing and joking, I felt physically ill. It happened during the lull between dinner and dessert. Mom tapped her glass with her spoon, gaining everyone's attention. "Before we have pumpkin pie, I want to share some wonderful news," she announced, her face glowing with pride. "Derek has just closed on the most beautiful home in Oakwood Hills. 5 bedrooms, a swimming pool, even a guest house. We're all so proud of how successful he's become." The table erupted in congratulations. Dad forced a smile, his hands trembling slightly as he raised his water glass in a toast. "To Derek and Emily's new home," he said, his voice barely audible over the excitement. Derek stood up, adopting a humble expression that I knew was completely fake. "It's nothing really," he said, though his smirk betrayed his pride. "Just working hard, like Dad taught me. We're hoping to be moved in by Christmas, and you're all invited for the housewarming." I felt something snap inside me. The fork I'd been holding clattered against my plate. Everyone turned to look at me, and I realized I'd made more noise than I intended. Something wrong, Allison? Derek asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. I looked at Dad, whose eyes were silently pleading with me. I looked at Mom, so proud of her golden child. I looked at Derek, standing there accepting praise for accomplishments built on theft from our father. That's impossible, I said quietly. He stole $300,000 from Dad's retirement fund last summer. The room went dead silent. My truth bomb had just obliterated our perfect family facade. The silence lasted only seconds before chaos erupted. Derek's face contorted with rage. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the dishes jump. "That's a damn lie." Mom looked between Derek and me, her face pale with shock. "Allison, what a terrible thing to say about your brother. Apologize immediately." I couldn't back down now. "I'm not lying. I found the transfer records when I was helping Dad organize his finances after the stroke. $327,000 transferred directly to Derek's account." All eyes turned to Dad, who seemed to shrink in his chair. His silence was damning. "Robert." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Is this true?" Dad couldn't meet her eyes. "Derek said it was temporary," he finally murmured. "For his business. He promised he'd pay it back." The room exploded. Derek shouted accusations at me, claiming I was making things up because I was jealous of his success. Mom began crying, while Emily sat frozen, staring at her husband with dawning horror. The cousins and aunt and uncle looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to leave or stay for this family implosion. "You've always been jealous of me," Derek spat, pointing at me across the table. "You couldn't stand that I was buying a nice house while you're still in that pathetic apartment." "I live within my means," I shot back. "I don't steal from our parents to fund a lifestyle I can't afford. Get out." Mom's voice cut through the chaos. For a moment, I thought she was talking to Derek, but when I turned to her, her eyes were fixed on me. "How dare you ruin Thanksgiving with these accusations? I want you to leave." "Mom, I'm telling the truth. Ask Dad." "Out," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I can't even look at you right now." I gathered my purse and coat in stunned silence. No one spoke as I walked to the door. Only Aunt Patricia followed me, squeezing my arm gently. "Call me tomorrow," she whispered. The drive home was a blur of tears. My phone began buzzing almost immediately. Text messages from family members poured in. Some were furious, accusing me of jealousy and attention-seeking. Others were confused, asking for more details. One from Derek chilled me to the bone. "You've always been jealous. You'll regret this." I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot and sat in my car, crying until I had no tears left. The truth had cost me my family in a single sentence. But the alternative, watching Derek continue to steal from our father while being celebrated for his success, was something I couldn't bear any longer. What I didn't realize then was that my bombshell revelation was just the beginning. The real storm was still gathering force. The week following Thanksgiving was the loneliest of my life. Mom refused to take my calls. Dad sent one text, "I wish you hadn't done that." Derek bombarded me with threatening messages until I blocked his number. Only Aunt Patricia maintained contact, becoming my lifeline to family developments. "Your mother is devastated," she told me during one of our daily calls. "Not just about the money, but about the public way it all came out. She keeps saying she raised you better than to air dirty laundry at Thanksgiving dinner." "What about what Derek did?" I asked, frustration bubbling over. "He stole Dad's retirement." "Why am I the villain here?" "Because you shattered the illusion," Aunt Patricia sighed. "Grace has spent decades building this image of a perfect family. Derek as the successful son, your father as the wise provider, herself as the devoted mother. Your revelation didn't just expose Derek's theft. It exposed the lie they've all been living." 3 days after Thanksgiving, Dad finally told Mom the full truth. According to Aunt Patricia, Mom had locked herself in their bedroom for an entire day afterward, refusing to speak to anyone. A family meeting was called for the following Sunday. I wasn't invited. "It's probably better you don't come," Aunt Patricia said when she called to tell me about it. "Derek is bringing financial records to prove he didn't steal anything. Says he was investing the money for your father with his permission." "That's a lie," I said flatly. "I saw the records. Those weren't investments. They were direct transfers to his personal account." "I believe you," Aunt Patricia assured me. "But most of the family wants to believe Derek. It's easier than accepting the alternative." The family meeting, as reported by my aunt, was a masterclass in manipulation. Derek arrived with a folder of documents that supposedly showed he had been managing Dad's money as a favor. He shed tears about how hurt he was by my accusations. He claimed a new house was from his own earnings, not Dad's money. "Your father sat there quietly for most of it," Aunt Patricia told me. "He only spoke up once, to ask when Derek planned to return the money. Derek promised it would be back in the account by next year, with interest." The family decided not to involve authorities. "Family matters stay private," Mom had insisted, according to my aunt. The consensus was that Derek would repay the money on a schedule, and the family would move forward, healing the rift caused by my inappropriate Thanksgiving announcement. I knew Derek had no intention of repaying anything. With my professional background in financial advising, I was uniquely qualified to trace where the money had gone. Each night after work, I pored over copies of Dad's financial records that I had kept when helping him organize his affairs. I created a detailed timeline, matching withdrawals from Dad's accounts with Derek's spending patterns. A $75,000 transfer coincided with the down payment on a boat Derek bought last spring. $50,000 disappeared right before his family's European vacation. The largest single transfer, $100,000, happened just 2 weeks before he put an offer on the Oakwood Hills house. But I needed more evidence. After much consideration, I hired Meredith Lane, a private investigator recommended by a colleague. I gave her everything I had discovered so far and asked her to dig deeper into Derek's finances. "Your brother has a serious problem," Meredith told me a week later, sliding a folder across the table at a quiet coffee shop. "And it's not just your father he's been stealing from." The evidence was damning. Derek had been systematically embezzling from the consulting firm where he worked as CFO. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums as his confidence grew. He had taken out multiple high-interest loans. Credit card statements showed charges at casinos in Atlantic City and online gambling sites. "He's got a gambling addiction," Meredith explained. "A serious one, based on these records. He's in debt to some potentially dangerous people." Most shocking was the revelation that Derek's wife Emily seemed completely unaware of their precarious financial situation. They maintained an extravagant lifestyle, private schools for the kids, luxury cars, expensive vacations, all built on a foundation of theft and deception. I faced an ethical dilemma that kept me awake at night. As a financial advisor, I had a professional obligation to report certain types of fraud. As a daughter, I wanted to protect my father from further pain. As a sister, some small part of me still hoped Derek could change. But the evidence was mounting that Derek's behavior wouldn't stop with Dad's retirement fund. He was on a destructive path that threatened to harm more people, including his own wife and children. The new house in Oakwood Hills wasn't a sign of success. It was another step in his escalating web of lies. I decided to continue gathering evidence before making my next move. The truth had already cost me my relationship with most of my family. If I was going to risk what little remained, I needed to be absolutely certain about what I was dealing with. Little did I know that the $300,000 from Dad's retirement was just the beginning of a much larger web of deception that would shock even me when fully revealed. Meredith's investigation uncovered a financial disaster far worse than I had initially suspected. Derek hadn't just defrauded our father. He had created an entire pyramid of lies that was on the verge of collapse. "Your brother has embezzled approximately $850,000 from Westfield Consulting over the past 3 years, Meredith explained, showing me financial records that made my stomach churn. As CFO, he had access to accounts that weren't closely monitored. He created fake vendors and approved payments to them, then redirected the money to shell companies he controlled. The house in Oakwood Hills, I discovered, had been purchased with only 5% down, with a massive mortgage that Derek couldn't possibly afford on legitimate income. It was a facade, another prop in his elaborate performance of success. His gambling losses in the past year alone total over $400,000, Meredith continued. He's been borrowing from one source to pay another, staying just ahead of discovery. Classic behavior for someone with his addiction. I took a deep breath, trying to process all this information. Do you think his employers suspect anything? They're starting an audit next month, Meredith said. That's according to my source in their accounting department. When that happens, everything will come to light. I felt physically ill. This wasn't just about our family anymore. Derek was headed for a spectacular, public downfall that would likely include criminal charges. Despite everything, I couldn't help feeling a pang of concern for my brother. If you're watching this and you've ever discovered someone you love has been living a double life, you know the sickening feeling in your stomach. That moment when you realize everything you thought you knew about someone was just a carefully constructed illusion. If this story resonates with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these real family stories, and sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences is the only thing that gets us through them. I never expected what happened next. With Meredith's findings in hand, I decided to reach out to other family members who might have been victims of Derek's financial manipulation. Cousin Sophia was reluctant to talk at first, but eventually admitted Derek had borrowed $50,000 for a guaranteed business investment 2 years ago. He said it was for a tech startup that was about to go public. Sophia confessed over coffee. He promised I'd double my money in 6 months. When I asked about it later, he said the company had been delayed in filing their IPO, but that it was still coming. I've been too embarrassed to tell anyone. Uncle George had loaned Derek $30,000 for expanding his consulting business. 3 other extended family members revealed similar stories. All told, Derek had borrowed and never repaid nearly $200,000 from family members besides our father. I created a comprehensive document detailing all of Derek's financial crimes, including copies of transfer records, loan agreements, and Meredith's findings about the embezzlement. The evidence was overwhelming, and I knew I needed to act before more people were hurt. But the moral weight of exposing my brother's crimes felt crushing. Despite his betrayal, he was still my brother. His children, my niece and nephew, would be devastated by the public revelation of their father's crimes. My parents, already dealing with Dad's health issues, would face the humiliation of their son's downfall. My decision was made for me when Derek's behavior began to escalate. He showed up at my office one afternoon, causing a scene in the lobby. "You think you can ruin my life and get away with it?" he shouted as security escorted him out. "You've always been jealous of me. You'll be sorry when I'm done with you." That night, I installed security cameras at my apartment entrance. I started varying my routes to work, constantly checking over my shoulder. The brother I'd grown up with seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a desperate man I no longer recognized. Then came the unexpected phone call that changed everything. "Allison? It's Emily, Derek's wife. Can we meet somewhere private? There's something you need to know." We met at a small cafe in a neighboring town where we were unlikely to run into family. Emily looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. "I found some strange financial documents," she said after ordering coffee with trembling hands. "Credit card statements I never knew existed. Notices for loans I never signed. At first, I thought it was identity theft, but..." She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. "It's Derek," I finished gently. She nodded, wiping away tears. "After what you said at Thanksgiving, I started paying attention. The numbers don't add up, Allison. Our lifestyle, the new house, it doesn't match what I know about our income. And now I'm finding these gambling receipts, cash withdrawals I can't explain." I took a deep breath. "Emily, there's a lot you don't know. I've been investigating, and what I've found is, it's bad." Over the next hour, I showed her the evidence I'd gathered. Emily moved from disbelief to shock to devastation as the full picture of Derek's deception emerged. "The children's college funds?" she asked in a hollow voice. I hesitated before answering.
"Gone.
"He withdrew them last year." Emily covered her face with her hands. "What am I going to do?" "The house, the cars, the kids' private school, it's all built on lies." "There's more," I said, reluctant to deliver the final blow but knowing she needed all the information. "Derek is planning to ask Mom and Dad for another loan at Christmas. $200,000 this time." Emily's head snapped up. "How do you know that?" "Meredith, my investigator, found text messages between Derek and his bookie. He owes a significant amount to some dangerous people. He's planning to get the money from Dad to cover those debts." Emily's face hardened.
"No.
"Absolutely not. Your parents have done enough for us, for him. This has to stop." We spent the rest of the afternoon formulating a plan. Emily would gather additional financial documents from their home. I would coordinate with Dad to prepare for an intervention before Christmas. We both knew that Derek would not accept help willingly, but his addiction and financial crimes had reached a point where we had no choice. What neither of us realized was how violently Derek would react when cornered, or how quickly his carefully constructed world would come crashing down around all of us. Planning an intervention for Derek required careful coordination. Emily gathered financial documents from their home office while Derek was at work. Dad provided additional records of the transfers from his retirement accounts. I compiled everything into a comprehensive presentation that left no room for denial. Throughout this process, I continued seeing a therapist to help me handle the emotional toll. Dr. Winters helped me work through my conflicted feelings. Anger at Derek's betrayal, guilt over exposing him, anxiety about my fractured family relationships. Family systems often resist change, Dr. Winters explained during one session. When you exposed your brother's behavior, you disrupted a system that, while dysfunctional, was familiar and comfortable for everyone involved. Your role as truth teller is necessary but painful. We scheduled the intervention for December 18th, 1 week before Christmas. Dad insisted on hosting it at their house in Lancaster, though Mom remained ambivalent about the whole plan. She still wants to believe there's an explanation, Dad told me when we spoke privately. That Derek made some mistakes but didn't intentionally steal from us. "Dad, you've seen the evidence," I reminded him gently. "This wasn't a mistake. It was systematic theft, not just from you but from multiple family members and his employer." Dad nodded, his eyes tired. "I know. But understanding something in your head isn't the same as accepting it in your heart, especially when it's your child." The day of the intervention arrived with a light snow falling across Lancaster. Emily had arranged for her parents to take Madison and Ryan for the weekend, telling them only that she and Derek needed to handle some family business. Aunt Patricia and Uncle George arrived first, followed by Cousin Sophia and her husband. Mom moved around the house nervously, arranging and rearranging refreshments. No one would feel like eating. I set up my laptop and a projector in the living room, my hands trembling slightly as I tested the presentation. The room felt too warm, too small for the confrontation we were about to have. Derek arrived at 2 o'clock, walking in with his usual confident stride. His smile faltered when he saw the assembled family members sitting solemnly in the living room. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from face to face. "Is this some kind of surprise party?" "Sit down, Derek," Dad said, his voice firmer than I'd heard it in years. "We need to talk." Derek's eyes landed on me, then narrowed. "What is she doing here?" "I thought we agreed after Thanksgiving that." "Sit down," Dad repeated, pointing to the empty chair position to face everyone. For a moment, I thought Derek might refuse or storm out. Instead, he slowly lowered himself into the chair, his body language defensive. "Derek," I began, keeping my voice steady and professional, "we've gathered today because we're concerned about some financial decisions you've made that have affected multiple family members." I started the presentation, methodically working through the evidence. First, the transfers from Dad's retirement accounts, with dates, amounts, and account numbers clearly displayed. Then the loans from other family members, each documented with text messages or emails where Derek had promised repayment. Finally, the evidence of embezzlement from Westfield Consulting and the gambling debts. Throughout the presentation, Derek's face cycled through a range of emotions: surprise, anger, denial, and finally, as the evidence mounted beyond refutation, a blank mask that was somehow more frightening than his rage. When I finished, the room fell silent. Emily spoke first. "Derek, we're here because we love you," she said, her voice breaking. "You need help. The gambling, the lies, it's a disease, and we want you to get treatment." Derek remained silent, staring at the floor. "Son," Dad said gently, "whatever financial troubles you're in, we can work through them together. But first, you need to acknowledge what's happened and accept help." Derek looked up then, his expression cold. "You think you know everything," he said quietly. "You have no idea what I've been dealing with. The pressure to succeed, to provide, to be the perfect son and husband and father. None of you understand what that's like." "Then help us understand," I said. "Talk to us." Something in Derek seemed to break. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. When he looked up again, tears streamed down his face. "It started small," he admitted, his voice hollow. "A few bets on football games, just for fun. Then I started winning, and it felt amazing. When I started losing, I just knew the next bet would turn things around. I borrowed a little from the company just temporarily. Then from Dad. I was going to pay it all back when I hit the big win. But the big win never came," Emily said softly. Derek shook his head. "I kept digging deeper, trying to get back to even. The more I lost, the bigger the bets became. I needed the rush. Nothing else made me feel alive like gambling did." For the next hour, Derek detailed his descent into addiction. The secret credit cards, the online betting accounts, the trips to Atlantic City when he was supposedly at business conferences. The thrill of winning that never lasted, and the crushing despair of losses that only fueled more gambling. Mom sat silently weeping throughout his confession. Dad looked both heartbroken and relieved to finally hear the truth. Emily alternated between anger and compassion, sometimes reaching for Derek's hand, other times pulling away as if burned. When Derek finished speaking, Dad laid out the family's conditions. Derek would enter a residential treatment program for gambling addiction immediately after Christmas. He would resign from Westfield Consulting and self-report his embezzlement, working with the company on a restitution plan rather than facing criminal charges. He would sell the Oakwood Hills house and use the proceeds to begin repaying what he had stolen from family members. "And if I refuse?" Derek asked, a hint of his old defiance returning. "Then we'll have no choice but to report everything to the authorities," Dad said firmly. "I won't press charges for what you took from me, but I can't speak for your employer or anyone else you've defrauded." Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You're all so self-righteous," he spat, sitting in judgment like you've never made mistakes. "This is all your fault, Allison. You couldn't stand to see me successful, so you had to tear me down." "Derek," Emily said sharply. "Stop. This isn't Allison's fault. She exposed the truth, but you created this situation." "You too." Derek laughed bitterly. "My own wife." "Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. I would do it all again. The gambling gave me something none of you ever did. A feeling that I mattered, that I was alive. The money, the house, all of it, it made you respect me, look up to me. Without those things, what am I to any of you?" He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Emily started to follow, but Dad stopped her. "Give him time to cool down," he advised. "He needs to process everything that's happened today." We sat in stunned silence for several minutes before beginning to discuss next steps. Emily would stay with her parents while Derek decided whether to accept the family's conditions. Dad would consult with a lawyer about protecting the remainder of his assets. I would help create a financial recovery plan for everyone affected. Just as we were preparing to leave, Mom's phone rang. Her face drained of color as she listened. "It's the hospital," she said, her voice trembling. "Derek's been in an accident. He was driving too fast, hit a patch of ice." She couldn't continue. The next few hours passed in a blur. We rushed to Lancaster General Hospital, a family united by crisis despite the revelations of the day. Derek had been driving intoxicated, his blood alcohol level well over the legal limit. His car had veered off the road and hit a tree. He was in surgery with multiple injuries, but the doctors were cautiously optimistic. As we gathered in the waiting room, Mom and Dad, Emily, Aunt Patricia, and Uncle George, Sophia and her husband, and me, I was struck by this strange sense of unity amid the chaos. Just hours earlier, we had been confronting the painful truth of Derek's deception. Now, we were praying together for his survival. I should have seen it, Mom whispered, clutching Dad's hand. All these years, I thought he was so successful, so happy. How did I miss the signs that he was suffering? We all miss them, I said gently. Derek became very good at showing us what we wanted to see. As midnight approached with no word from the surgical team, I stepped outside for some air. The night was clear and cold, stars visible above the hospital parking lot. I thought about the tumultuous path that had led us here, from my Thanksgiving revelation to this moment of terrifying uncertainty. Derek had caused immeasurable pain with his deception and theft. Yet watching my parents' faces as they waited for news about their son, I understood that love wasn't diminished by disappointment or betrayal. It remained complicated and resilient, even when everything else fell apart. Whatever happened next, our family would never be the same. The perfect facade was shattered beyond repair. But perhaps something more authentic could emerge from the wreckage, a family built on truth rather than illusion, on genuine acceptance rather than performance. The hospital doors slid open behind me, and Dad stepped out. "The doctor's coming to talk to us," he said. "They've finished the surgery." I took a deep breath and followed him inside, ready to face whatever came next. 3 months after the intervention and Derek's accident, our family was still navigating the aftermath of both crises. Derek had survived the surgery, but spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from multiple injuries, including a broken leg, fractured ribs, and a concussion. The accident had been a wake-up call, forcing him to face the consequences of his actions in ways our intervention alone might not have accomplished. Physical recovery coincided with other reckonings. Westfield Consulting discovered the embezzlement during their scheduled audit, but Derek's voluntary disclosure and commitment to restitution, negotiated through a lawyer Dad hired, prevented criminal charges. Instead, he agreed to repay the full amount plus a penalty, a financial obligation that would take years to fulfill. After much discussion, our parents decided against pressing charges for the retirement fund theft. "He's still our son," Dad explained when we talked privately. "I want my money back, but I don't want to see him in prison." The family established conditions. Derek entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction in February, committing to a 90-day program followed by ongoing therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He agreed to financial restitution plans for all family members he had borrowed from, with payments to be administered through a trust overseen by a neutral third party. Derek and Emily separated shortly after Christmas. She moved with Madison and Ryan to her parents' home in Delaware, filing for legal separation but not immediate divorce. "I need time," she told me during one of our now regular coffee meetings. "I still love Derek, or at least the man I thought he was. But I can't expose the kids to more chaos while he's working through his issues." The separation added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Derek moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment after completing his treatment program, the Oakwood Hills house listed for sale at a significant loss. I helped Dad rebuild his retirement savings as best we could, creating a conservative investment plan and contributing some of my own savings to ensure he and Mom would be secure. "You don't need to do this," Dad protested when I presented him with a check. "I want to," I insisted. "You and Mom deserve a retirement without financial stress." My relationship with Mom remained strained. While she no longer openly blamed me for destroying the family, she maintained that I should have handled the situation privately rather than humiliating everyone at Thanksgiving. I didn't know how else to stop it. I tried to explain during one tense conversation. "You wouldn't have believed me without Dad confirming it," and he was too ashamed to speak up. "You could have found another way," she insisted. Family problems should stay within the family. Christmas had passed with separate celebrations. Derek at the treatment center, Emily and the kids with her parents, me alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and holiday movies. Mom and Dad had declined all invitations, spending the day quietly at home. The emotional toll was significant. I continued seeing Dr. Winters weekly, working through my complicated feelings about my role as the family truth teller. "You did the right thing," she assured me. Even though it caused pain, allowing the deception to continue would have caused even more damage in the long run. Some family relationships strengthened through this ordeal. Aunt Patricia became a closer confidant than ever before. Cousin Sophia and I reconnected, bonding over our shared experience of Derek's financial manipulation. Uncle George, who had initially been angry about my Thanksgiving announcement, eventually apologized after seeing the comprehensive evidence. My professional life provided an unexpected bright spot. My boss called me into his office in February, closing the door for a private conversation. "I heard through the grapevine what happened with your brother," he said. "Not the details, just that you uncovered some financial misconduct and handled it ethically despite personal consequences." I tensed, unsure where this was going. "We're creating a new position heading our ethics compliance department," he continued. "Given how you've demonstrated your commitment to financial integrity even in the most difficult circumstances, I'd like to offer you the role." The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and more responsibility. I accepted with mixed emotions, success that had emerged from family tragedy. The Oakwood Hills house sold in March, at a price significantly below what Derek had paid. The proceeds went directly to the Restitution Trust, distributed proportionally among his victims. The beautiful colonial that had triggered my Thanksgiving revelation became another symbol of Derek's facade. As spring approached, I found myself reflecting on the past several months while sitting in a park near my apartment. The trees were just beginning to bud, promising new life after the long winter. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek, our communication still limited and formal. 6 months sober today. Thought you should know. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Despite everything, I felt a small spark of pride for my brother's progress. Recovery wasn't linear, and 6 months represented significant effort. "Congratulations," I texted back. "One day at a time." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally. "Thank you for stopping me before I lost everything. It didn't feel that way at the time, but you saved my life." I closed my eyes, tears threatening. The words I'd waited months to hear, acknowledgement that my painful truth-telling had been necessary. It didn't erase the damage or fully heal our relationship, but it was a start. That evening I called Mom. Our conversations were still awkward, but I persisted in maintaining contact. To my surprise, she mentioned the possibility of hosting a small family dinner the following weekend. "Nothing fancy," she said quickly. "Just you, me, your father. Maybe Derek, if he feels comfortable." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was an opening, a crack in the wall of resentment that had formed after Thanksgiving. I accepted immediately. As I hung up, I realized that while our family would never return to what it had been before, we were slowly finding our way towards something new. Something less perfect on the surface, perhaps, but more authentic underneath. The facade had crumbled, revealing the messy, complicated reality of family life. In that messiness, paradoxically, I found unexpected peace. Exactly 1 year after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, I hosted dinner at my newly purchased home. It wasn't a sprawling colonial in Oakwood Hills, but a charming 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood that I had fallen in love with immediately. It represented something important to me, a home purchased honestly, within my means, without pretense or facade. The dining room table only seated 8, which was perfect for our smaller gathering. Mom and Dad arrived first, Mom carrying her traditional sweet potato casserole, Dad a bottle of sparkling cider in deference to Derek's sobriety. "The house is lovely, Allison," Mom said as I gave them a tour. Her compliment felt genuine, without the subtle comparative remarks that had once been her habit. "It suits you." Derek arrived next, now 8 months sober and working steadily at an accounting firm that had given him a second chance, with strict oversight and reduced responsibilities. He looked healthier than he had in years, the haunted look in his eyes replaced by clear-eyed sobriety, his formerly polished appearance now more authentic and less calculated. Emily came with Madison and Ryan, though she and Derek arrived separately. Their separation continued, but they had established an amicable co-parenting relationship. Emily had returned to work as a teacher, moving from her parents' home to a rental closer to Lancaster. Aunt Patricia and Uncle George rounded out the group, arriving with pumpkin pies and warm hugs. "Wouldn't miss it, dear," Aunt Patricia whispered as she embraced me. "So proud of you." The gathering felt both familiar and entirely new. We used my grandmother's china, rescued from my parents' house, but paper napkins instead of Mom's formal linen ones. I had cooked most of the meal myself, with everyone contributing side dishes. The conversation flowed more naturally than I had dared to hope, careful at first, but warming as the afternoon progressed. Dad said grace before the meal, his voice steady as he expressed gratitude for family, for health, and for truth that, while painful, leads to healing. I caught his eye as he finished, exchanging a small smile of understanding. The financial boundaries we had established over the past year remained firmly in place. Derek was 5 months into his restitution plan, making regular payments to the trust that distributed funds to those he had defrauded. He lived modestly, his flashy lifestyle replaced by a focus on recovery and rebuilding relationships. "I've been thinking a lot about patterns," Derek said during dinner, after the conversation had turned to his recovery journey. "How I learned early on that success and material things were what earned approval in our family. I'm not blaming anyone," he added quickly, glancing at our parents. "Just understanding how I developed some unhealthy beliefs." Mom looked uncomfortable, but didn't object. This new willingness to acknowledge uncomfortable truths rather than maintain appearances represented significant growth for our family. After dessert, as we lingered around the table with coffee, Dad cleared his throat. "I want to say something," he began, looking around the table before his gaze settled on me. "Allison, last Thanksgiving when you spoke up about what was happening, I was angry and ashamed. Angry because you exposed something I wanted to keep hidden, and ashamed because I hadn't had the courage to address it myself." The table fell silent, everyone focused on Dad's words. "You showed remarkable courage," he continued. "You risked relationships and comfort to speak truth that needed to be spoken. Without that moment, as painful as it was, I don't think we would be here today, on a path toward healing. So, thank you." Tears filled my eyes. After a year of being viewed as the family disruptor, this public acknowledgement of my difficult choice meant everything. Mom reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Your father's right," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I've been unfair to you, Allison. It was easier to blame you than to face what was happening in our family. I'm sorry for that." "Thank you," I managed, overwhelmed by this unexpected moment of validation. As the evening continued, Emily helped me clear the dishes while Derek entertained the kids in the living room. "He's really trying," she said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher. "It's not enough to save our marriage, but it's giving our children a chance to have a healthy relationship with their father. That matters." Later, Mom suggested a family photo. Our first since the previous Thanksgiving's disaster. We gathered in front of my fireplace, arranging ourselves without the rigid hierarchy that had once placed Derek front and center. The resulting image captured something true, a family still healing, imperfect but authentic. As guests prepared to leave, Derek hung back, asking if we could talk privately. We stepped onto my back porch, the November air crisp but not uncomfortable. "I owe you the most complete apology," he said, meeting my eyes directly. "Not just for the money, but for how I treated you our entire lives. The competition, the put-downs, the way I played on Mom and Dad's favoritism. I was insecure, and tearing you down made me feel better about myself." I nodded, acknowledging the truth of his words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. just for you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm working every day to become someone different. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I have complicated feelings about everything that's happened, Derek. I'm glad you're getting help, and I want you to succeed in your recovery. But trust will take time to rebuild. I understand. He smiled slightly. The therapist says I need to get comfortable with consequences and uncomfortable emotions. This is part of that. We rejoined the others, helping them gather coats and leftovers. The goodbyes were warm, with promises to speak soon that felt genuine rather than obligatory. After everyone left, I sat alone in my living room, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The family mythology had been shattered, replaced by something less perfect but more real. Relationships were being rebuilt on foundations of honesty rather than appearance. The golden child narrative had given way to recognition of Derek as a flawed human working toward recovery. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Proud of you, not just today, but every day. Love you. I smiled, typing back a simple, love you too, that carried the weight of our shared journey. The truth I had spoken 1 year ago had indeed destroyed our family facade. But perhaps that facade had needed to fall for authentic healing to begin. Sometimes the most painful moments create space for growth that would otherwise be impossible. Sometimes one sentence, spoken at the right moment, can change everything. If my story has shown you anything, I hope it's that sometimes speaking the truth, even when it costs you dearly, is the only way forward. Has a difficult truth ever changed your family dynamic? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you in any way, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel for more real family stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that healing is always possible, even after the most painful betrayals. Sometimes the family we rebuild after everything falls apart is stronger than the perfect image we tried so hard to maintain.